It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson, and today, once again, I'm joined by Luke and Susie, a husband and wife radio team. They have 3 young boys, and the conversation just doesn't seem to be going away about this content that pops up on social media from time to time that is so damaging for our children. Instead of talking about the specifics, as I have done on the podcast a few times, we're going to have a slightly more general conversation about how we're supposed to deal with these social media challenges.
Dr. Justin Coulson, always good to talk to you. How are you?
Really nice to be with you, Luke. Hello, Susie.
Hello. Now, we know that social media has its pros and its cons, and recently we saw a big story going around about a particular con. There's material and content that is targeted towards children that is just not healthy for them. And our role as parents, I guess, sometimes is we've either got sort of 2 extremes. Yeah. We're either in too hard and we don't let them look at anything ever until they're 29, or we kind of just go, oh, they'll be fine, and back off a little too much. What's the nice, healthy middle ground for us to find good balance in helping children navigate this whole social media world in a safe way?
There's a model that I think is helpful for most parents, and that is that when children are young, we need to cocoon them. We want to bubble wrap them, fairy floss them, keep them safe. And everyone says, oh, we don't need these bubble wrapped kids. But when they're little, we actually do need bubble wrapped kids. We want to make sure that they feel that the world is safe and secure. And that means that we ensure that they're not exposed to content that could be damaging, that could create trauma, that could make them feel like the world is not a safe place. That's healthy. Now, it's important as they grow that we start to explain why we're doing what we're doing and give them opportunities to stretch their wings where they can. So that might mean that we're not going to give you kids access unfettered to Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter because you're 8. Or you're 4, or whatever it might be. But what it does mean is that we can say, yeah, of course you guys can play on screens and devices in ways that we're going to work with you on to make sure that you're feeling safe. As they get older, though, we move from cocooning them into that reasoned cocooning where we're explaining why we're cocooning them, and then we move into something called pre-arming. And pre-arming basically means pretty soon you're going to be old enough to do this stuff. You know, you're 9 or 10 or 11 years old, and you know that Instagram is coming. You know that the opportunity to be on social media is nearly here. We need to pre-arm you. We need to talk to you about what it's going to be like and what the rules are and why those rules exist and how we're going to continue to monitor and look after your safety. Once they're on these social platforms, let's say from age 13, which is probably about the age that most involved parents say, okay, finally you're allowed to because of that United States law about collecting data about young people. Once they're on, we still need to be involved in both cocooning, reasoned cocooning, and pre-arming conversations. For example, it might be okay for your children to be on Instagram, but you're going to cocoon them from a whole lot of influences by saying to them, it's okay to be here, but not to follow X, Y, and Z. You're only allowed to follow people that you know. So we're still cocooning them with lots of reasoning. And we're pre-arming them by saying, why don't you make some decisions and we can have a conversation about why you want to follow these people. Or, as you get older, we're going to let you start to use TikTok or Snapchat or maybe some of the other things that are for kids who are older again. We need to make sure that you're prepared for that by being pre-armed. But then we move, once they're around 14 or so, into what we call reasoned deference. That is, the kids come to us and they say, I want to do this. And we say, well, you're only a few years off being an adult now. What do you think's the best thing to do? And they say, I think I should be allowed to do this. And you say, well, let's talk about that for a bit. And so you go through a reasoned process where you're deferring to them until finally they're around 17, 18 years of age, and you defer to them. You say, well, guess what? You're a grown-up now. You get to choose. We're here if you want to talk about it. So that model, I think, is the model that we might use when it comes to kids and their access to what's happening on screens and social media. Do we need to be cocooning them? Do we need to be pre-arming them? Or are we able to start to defer to them and their judgment?
And yet, strangely, under any of those comments, Justin, you never said, under my house, it's my rules. I'm really, really shocked by that. I'll let you respond to my quip because I can see you want to.
Well, last week, after this thing went viral, the Prime Minister commented that parents should be removing devices from their children. And I'm not going to be political about this. I have no political blood in me at all. I'm not interested in political conversations. What I am interested in is what's going to give us the best outcome for our children. And while I'm sure that the Prime Minister had the very best of intentions, when we start saying to our children, you disobey my rules and I take the phone off you, what happens is they start to say, well, I'll just make sure that you don't catch me disobeying the rules. I'll follow your rules on my device, but when I'm hanging out at my friend's house, when I'm on the school bus, when I'm in the school playground, that's when I'll do whatever I want, and I'll use their devices so you can't catch me. So
on top of that, it says that if I do the wrong thing, I'm not going to fess up to it because you're going to take the device from me, so I'm going to hide it as much as I can.
Spot on. So that approach, that my house, my rules, my way of the highway approach, it kind of makes sense, especially when parents are in fight or flight mode. They're freaking out. They've heard on the news that this traumatic incident has been streamed on all kinds of social media platforms, and they want to protect their children. Therefore, they say, you need to delete the app, you need to hand in your device. Not going to work, because even if they do, all that happens is that they start to resent us and they get so curious about what they're missing out on, and they might even go and look for it in a place that's not so safe. So I think as parents, we've got the responsibility to say, hey, let's have a sit-down, gentle conversation. Let's work out the best way forward so that we can all feel good about the decisions you're going to make.
In this whole scenario that we're referring to, the Prime Minister's got involved because there was an incident, there was a moment. And many of us as parents are freaking out going, okay, we don't want to draw attention to it if our kids don't have their attention already drawn to it. And yet we don't want to assume that because they haven't said anything that they haven't had attention drawn to it. And we don't want to leave it to chance that they can accidentally see it, even if I think they haven't accidentally seen it. And so, as you can tell by my just rambling there, in our heads, there was a whole lot of, we can try and do the right thing but feel like we've done the wrong thing. How do we navigate that space where there's a strong possibility, but we don't know for sure whether they've been exposed?
I can almost hear the fear and the exasperation and the frustration in your comment, Luke. It's like, but what are we supposed to do? We can't win either way. If we don't say anything, they might be exposed and then we won't know. But if we do say something, they might go and find it and be exposed to do this. Yep. The response is as follows. There is consistently always scary, horrible, terrible, no good, very bad things on the internet, and especially on social media platforms. There are people with horrible motivations who get access to this content and even hide and embed the content in otherwise innocent, pure, good places. It's devastating. Frankly, it's disgusting. It appalls me. But this is the world that we live in. And to threaten your children and say, you know what, you can't have social media because of it, that means that they do miss out on all of the things that really do matter to them, which means that we may end up turning them against us and having them not listen to us at all. Because the reality is many, many, many children have not been exposed to this traumatic issue. And had there not been such a big media brouhaha, fewer, again, would have been exposed to it. So it really is just such a tricky thing. I really think that the best thing to do, Luke, is have a gentle conversation with the kids and say, I'm worried, and as a result, we need to come up with a solution that's going to work. And sometimes we need to put protective measures in place. If we don't, and I heard this analogy just recently on another podcast, and I thought, I've got to use that. That is so good. If we don't do this, if we don't sit down with our kids and talk to them about establishing boundaries that work, it's like saying to them, you know, when we go for a drive in the car this afternoon, we're going to put our seatbelts on, but we're not going to ask you to put yours on. You don't need to wear one because you'll be fine. No, we wouldn't do that in a car, and we shouldn't be doing that on social media.
Yep, love it. I sat down with them, by the way, and I went, okay. And I just put a little feeler out there to say, you know, there's something been going around on the internet. Have you heard about it? And they all said yes, they had. They'd had conversations at school. They said, we haven't seen anything. We haven't seen what it's about. We talked about the fact that without highlighting what was in it, we just went, you know, it's probably something that no human, no adult or child should be watching or be exposed to, because it could be very upsetting. And I don't want you to be upset. So we talked about what the response would be. And our decision together was, as they watch a YouTube video or something that is approved by mummy or daddy, which all their channels are, then we'll just make sure we don't click on anything that we don't know. And we don't allow it to roll into a video or someone that we don't know. Let's just protect ourselves from accidentally seeing something that we don't want to see.
You guys are fortunate. Your children are under the age of 10.
Yes.
11, over, 2 or under.
Yep.
Right. So once you get to around that 12, 13 mark, there can be a shift. And I'm not surprised that you had a good experience with that, because that's how kids are pretty... I know some people are thinking my children aren't compliant, they're under 10, but as a general rule, as a parent, you can kind of say, well, this is what I want you to do, and they say, I don't want to, and you say, well, you will, because I'm your parent, and they they're more likely to be compliant there. Whereas once they get to about 11, 12, 13, all of a sudden, it's like they wake up one morning, they're like, no. And you say, no, I'm the parent and you will. And they say, no, I won't. And I reckon if you've got older kids, there's a couple of things to quickly bear in mind. And I know that our time is short now, so let's wrap this up. First of all, children are seeing it. I'm hearing far too many stories, and they are being traumatized by this kind of content. There's been this kind of content before. It will happen again. Our job is to do our best to help them to stay away from it because it is affecting them. They are also showing it to one another because they get some sort of social capital out of it. You know, I'm the cool kid, look what I found, and now I'm going to show everyone else as well. We want to connect them to humanity. We want to connect them to empathy. There's nothing hilarious about it. Something very, very sad and tragic about it. Nothing hilarious, though. And so our job then becomes, let's imagine for a minute that we're related to the person involved in this live stream. Let's imagine for a minute what life must be like for them. Let's imagine for a minute how we would be talking about this if it happened to somebody that we know. Would we be showing it? Would we be talking about how funny it is? And I reckon most kids in those circumstances are going to go pretty quiet and recognize, yeah, no, probably not. We want to help them to have that empathy, and then we can probably have some more sensible conversations about ways to keep everybody safe online.
Beautiful. Dr. Justin Coulson, thanks for having this chat with us. It's pretty tough stuff to try and navigate, but we appreciate that you're there to support us and guide us through it all. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Luke. Well, it's a tough topic, but thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast, or if you know somebody who might find it helpful, please share it with them. You can share it out of the app in which you're listening, or you can go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. We love getting all your 5-star reviews, and we've had sufficient that Apple has taken notice of us and started to share the podcast a bit more widely. So thank you. If you're a new listener, by the way, thanks and welcome. It's great to have you here. If you have not yet left a rating and review, could you visit Apple Podcasts for me? I know it's a bit of a favor, but it'll only take a minute, and it will make such a difference in helping other people find out about the podcast. It's the reviews and the ratings that essentially make the podcast more visible to other people so that they can have happy families. If you'd like more info about how I can help your family flourish, we have Happy Families memberships, and all the information is at happyfamilies.com.au. So many wonderful reviews coming through about the memberships. People are getting so much value out of them, and their families are genuinely becoming happier, because when you concentrate on something and send your energy and focus there, it just gets happier. That's happyfamilies.com.au. Just click on the memberships tab and you can get memberships for as little as $2.50 a week. It's cheap as chips, and the impact can be lifelong. happyfamilies.com.au, or you can visit my Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families.